For most of human history, people cared deeply about their teeth long before the modern toothbrush ever existed. The idea that ancient societies simply accepted bad breath, rotting teeth, or painful decay is one of the most persistent myths about the past. In reality, dental care is nearly as old as civilization itself. Wherever humans lived, ate, and aged, they experimented with ways to clean their mouths, protect their teeth, and relieve pain, often using methods that were surprisingly sophisticated, sometimes effective, and occasionally dangerous. Long before plastic handles and soft nylon bristles, the human mouth was both a survival tool and a social signal. Teeth mattered because eating mattered. Chewing tough grains, fibrous plants, dried meat, and coarse bread put enormous stress on enamel. But teeth also mattered because appearance mattered. Across cultures, clean teeth were associated with health, vitality, and even moral character. Bad breath was not merely unpleasant. It was often believed to signal internal imbalance, illness, or spiritual impurity. The earliest evidence of deliberate tooth cleaning comes not from written texts, but from archaeology. Human remains dating back thousands of years show distinctive wear patterns on teeth that cannot be explained by eating alone. Fine scratches near the gum line suggest repeated rubbing with fibrous materials. In some cases, plant fibers are found embedded between teeth, hinting that people actively removed food debris long before understanding bacteria. At this early stage, tooth cleaning was not about aesthetics or whitening. It was about survival. Food stuck between teeth led to infection, abscesses, and eventually death. Without antibiotics, even a small oral infection could spread rapidly. People learned through painful experience that keeping the mouth clean reduced suffering. One of the most widespread early tools was the chew stick, a small twig, branch, or root chewed at one end until it frayed into soft fibers. The chewed end acted like bristles, while the natural compounds in the plant sometimes offered antibacterial benefits. This method appeared independently across multiple regions of the world, suggesting that it was an intuitive solution rather than a copied invention. Different plants were chosen for different reasons. Some were selected for their toughness, creating strong fibers capable of scraping plaque from teeth. Others were chosen for taste or medicinal properties. Bitter roots, aromatic woods, and resinous plants were especially popular as they helped neutralize odors and stimulate saliva flow. Saliva itself played a crucial role, washing away debris and helping protect enamel. Even without understanding microbes, ancient people recognized cause and effect. They noticed that certain plants reduced mouth pain, freshened breath, or slowed decay. Over generations, this knowledge became tradition, passed down orally and reinforced through daily habit. Beyond chew sticks, people used abrasive substances to polish their teeth. Ash, crushed shells, charcoal, sand, and powdered stone were common ingredients. These materials were rubbed directly onto teeth using fingers, cloth, or plant fibers. The goal was to scrub away buildup and stains. While effective at removing debris, these abrasives could also damage enamel over time, leading to sensitivity and wear. Yet people accepted this trade-off. In a world without refined sugar or processed foods, enamel damage accumulated slowly. Removing plaque and trapped food mattered more than preserving microscopic enamel thickness. Clean teeth were preferable to infected ones. Interestingly, tooth powders were often combined with herbs, spices, and salts. These mixtures served multiple purposes at once: cleaning, deodorizing, and soothing. Salt reduced inflammation, herbs numbed pain, aromatics masked odor. Dental care became a blend of hygiene and medicine. Social rituals reinforced these practices. Mouth cleaning often occurred in the morning, before communal interaction. In some cultures, failing to clean one's teeth was considered disrespectful. Breath mattered when speaking closely, sharing food, or engaging in ritual activity. Oral hygiene was not private, it was social. Despite these efforts, dental problems remained common. Diets heavy in coarse grains wore teeth down quickly. Grit from stone-ground flour embedded itself into bread, acting like sandpaper with every bite. Teeth flattened, cracked, and exposed sensitive inner layers. Cleaning helped, but it could not fully prevent damage. Still, people refused to surrender to decay passively. They probed cavities with tools, packed holes with plant resins or wax, and applied poultices to gums. Tooth pain was treated aggressively because ignoring it often meant unbearable suffering later. Oral care was one of the few areas where daily maintenance clearly improved quality of life. The absence of toothbrushes did not mean the absence of knowledge. It meant adaptation. Human ingenuity filled the gap using what was available: plants, minerals, fire, and observation. Over time, these methods became more refined, more ritualized, and in some cases, surprisingly close to modern dental principles. What emerges from the archaeological and anthropological record is not neglect, but persistence. People experimented, failed, adjusted, and tried again. They noticed what worked and abandoned what did not. Oral hygiene evolved slowly, shaped by environment, diet, and culture. And as societies grew more complex, so did their understanding of the mouth. Teeth were no longer just tools for eating, they became symbols of health, status, and identity. How people cleaned them would soon reflect not just necessity, but belief. In the next part, we'll explore how early civilizations transformed tooth cleaning from a practical habit into a structured practice, mixing medicine, ritual, and daily routine in ways that would influence oral hygiene for thousands of years. As human societies became more settled and complex, tooth cleaning slowly shifted from instinctive habit to deliberate routine. When people began living in permanent villages and cities, their diets changed, and so did the stresses placed on their teeth. Agriculture introduced softer foods like cooked grains and porridges, but it also introduced new problems. Stone-ground flour carried fine grit that wore enamel down over time. Food was eaten more frequently, increasing the chance of debris lodging between teeth. Oral care was no longer occasional, it had to become regular. In these early civilizations, people began to observe patterns more carefully. They noticed that some individuals lost teeth earlier than others, that certain diets caused pain faster, and that some cleaning methods worked better than others. Without microscopes or germ theory, knowledge advanced through experience. Trial and error shaped dental habits in ways that feel surprisingly familiar today. In ancient Mesopotamia, where some of the earliest written records survive, medical texts reveal that tooth pain was taken seriously. Sumerian and later Babylonian writings describe dental ailments in both practical and supernatural terms. Toothache was sometimes blamed on a tooth worm, a mythical creature believed to burrow into the tooth and cause pain. While the explanation was incorrect, the treatments were often logical. Mixtures of herbs, oils, and mineral powders were applied to teeth and gums, often with the intent of cleaning, soothing, and disinfecting. These treatments were not random. Many of the substances used had real antibacterial or anti-inflammatory properties. Oils reduced friction and sealed exposed surfaces. Resins filled small cavities temporarily. Salts and ashes dried out infected areas. Even when the explanation involved spirits or worms, The physical response was often effective enough to keep people using the method. Ancient Egyptians took oral hygiene a step further. Archaeological evidence and medical papyri show that Egyptians were highly concerned with cleanliness, including the mouth. They developed some of the earliest known tooth-cleaning powders, mixing ingredients such as crushed pumice, burnt eggshells, ox hooves, myrrh, and ash. These powders were applied using fingers, cloth, or small sticks. Egyptian dental care was partly cosmetic and partly medical. Clean teeth were associated with purity and order, values deeply embedded in Egyptian culture. However, their abrasive mixtures could be harsh. Many Egyptian mummies show severe tooth wear, not just from diet, but from overscrubbing with rough powders. Enamel erosion was common, yet infections were sometimes reduced through this constant cleaning. Interestingly, Egyptians also understood the importance of fresh breath. Aromatic ingredients were included not just for taste, but to mask odor. Breath was believed to reflect internal health, and unpleasant smells were associated with decay, illness, or imbalance. Oral care was linked to the whole body, not isolated to the mouth. In ancient India, oral hygiene became tightly integrated into daily ritual. Early Ayurvedic texts describe tooth cleaning as part of a broader morning routine meant to balance the body. Chew sticks made from specific medicinal trees were recommended based on their taste and perceived effect on bodily systems. Bitter, astringent, and pungent flavors were thought to strengthen gums and reduce decay. These chew sticks were not chosen arbitrarily. Many came from plants with natural antibacterial compounds. Some were mildly abrasive, helping scrape plaque from teeth. Others stimulated saliva, which naturally cleans the mouth. Ayurveda emphasized consistency. Teeth were to be cleaned every morning before eating or speaking. Oral hygiene was discipline, not convenience. Ancient Chinese medical traditions also recognized the importance of dental health. While toothbrush-like tools were still centuries away, tooth cleaning was performed using cloth, fingers, and plant fibers. Chinese texts linked dental health to overall bodily balance, particularly the kidneys and bones. Loose teeth were seen as signs of deeper imbalance rather than isolated decay. Charcoal and salt were commonly used in China to clean teeth. Charcoal absorbed odors and stains, while salt reduced inflammation and helped cleanse wounds. These substances were readily available and effective, though abrasive. As with other cultures, enamel wear was accepted as a reasonable cost for cleanliness and pain reduction. Across these civilizations, a common theme emerges. People did not clean their teeth casually. Oral hygiene was structured, intentional, and often ritualized. It occurred at specific times of day, used specific materials, and followed cultural rules. Teeth were not treated as expendable until pain demanded action. They were actively maintained. The absence of a toothbrush did not limit creativity. Instead, it encouraged experimentation. People adapted their tools to their environment. Where wood was plentiful, chew sticks dominated. Where minerals were abundant, powders and abrasives were used. Where herbs thrived, medicinal cleaning blends emerged. These methods were not perfect. Cavities still formed. Teeth still broke. But cleaning reduced the severity and frequency of dental disaster. It extended the functional lifespan of teeth in a world where losing them could mean malnutrition or death. Perhaps most importantly, these practices demonstrate something fundamental about human behavior. Even without scientific understanding, people observed outcomes, shared knowledge, and built traditions around what worked. Oral hygiene was not a modern invention imposed by science. It was a necessity discovered through lived experience. By the time classical civilizations emerged, tooth cleaning was already ancient. Generations had refined methods, debated substances, and embedded oral care into daily life. What would change next was not the desire to clean teeth, but the tools themselves. In the next part, we will explore how classical civilizations refined dental care further, introducing new materials, new beliefs, and early forms of professional dentistry that pushed oral hygiene into an entirely new stage of development. As civilizations entered the classical era, tooth cleaning became more than a household habit passed quietly from generation to generation. It became something discussed by physicians, philosophers, and scholars, woven into broader ideas about health, balance, and civilization itself. The mouth was no longer viewed only as a place where food entered the body. It was seen as a gateway, a vulnerable opening where neglect could poison the entire system. In ancient Greece, medical thinkers began approaching oral health through observation and logic rather than ritual alone. Hippocrates and later Greek physicians wrote about tooth pain, gum disease, and bad breath as physical conditions with physical causes. While their understanding was limited, they rejected purely supernatural explanations and focused instead on diet, cleanliness, and bodily balance. Tooth decay was associated with trapped food, excess moisture, and imbalance in bodily fluids. Greeks cleaned their teeth using cloths, sponges, fingers, and small wooden sticks. Abrasive powders made from crushed bones, shells, or charcoal were commonly applied to scrub the teeth clean. These powders were sometimes mixed with vinegar or wine, which helped dissolve residue and kill odor-causing organisms. The sting was unpleasant, but the results were noticeable. Fresh breath held social importance in Greek culture. Public speaking, debate, and close social interaction were central to daily life. Bad breath was not merely embarrassing, it undermined credibility. A clean mouth signaled discipline, health, and self-control. Oral hygiene became indirectly tied to intellect and virtue. The Romans inherited Greek medical ideas and expanded them aggressively. Roman culture valued order, routine, and discipline, and dental care reflected these priorities. Cleanliness was a marker of civilization, and neglect was associated with barbarism. Teeth were cleaned daily, often in the morning, before public life began. Romans used a wide range of tooth-cleaning substances. Charcoal, crushed bones, oyster shells, and pumice were ground into fine powders and rubbed onto teeth using cloth or small sticks. Some recipes included powdered herbs or fragrant resins to improve taste and scent. Roman writers described these mixtures in surprising detail, debating which ingredients whitened teeth best and which strengthened gums. Tooth whitening mattered deeply in Roman society. White teeth were associated with youth, vitality, and attractiveness. Stained teeth suggested illness, aging, or moral decay. Roman satire mocked individuals with discolored teeth, while poets praised bright smiles. Oral hygiene crossed from health into aesthetics. At the same time, Roman diets created new dental challenges. Wine, dried fruits, and sauces increased acidity and sugar exposure. Teeth required more frequent cleaning to avoid decay. Romans responded by scrubbing harder and more often, sometimes damaging enamel in the process. Many Roman skeletons show heavy tooth wear from aggressive cleaning combined with abrasive diets. Interestingly, Romans also understood that cleaning alone was not enough. They practiced early forms of dentistry, including tooth extraction and cavity probing. Dental tools have been found at Roman sites, including forceps and scrapers. These procedures were painful and dangerous, but they reflected a belief that dental intervention was preferable to prolonged suffering. One of the most infamous Roman dental practices involved the use of urine as a cleaning agent. While shocking to modern sensibilities, aged urine contains ammonia, which effectively breaks down stains and kills bacteria. Romans collected urine for various cleaning purposes, including laundering clothes and whitening teeth. Though unpleasant, the method worked, reinforcing the idea that effectiveness mattered more than comfort. In China, during this same period, dental care continued evolving along a different path. Chinese medical philosophy emphasized balance and internal harmony. Tooth decay was not seen as an isolated problem, but as a symptom of imbalance within the body. Cleaning the teeth was important, but so was regulating diet, breath, and energy flow. Chinese tooth cleaning methods included rubbing teeth with cloth dipped in salt, herbal mixtures, or charcoal. Aromatic herbs were favored to freshen breath and calm the gums. Oral care was often combined with breathing exercises and dietary recommendations meant to strengthen the body as a whole. Across these classical civilizations, one truth becomes clear. People did not accept dental decay as inevitable. Pain was feared, infection was dangerous, and tooth loss had serious consequences. Oral hygiene was a daily investment in comfort, health, and social standing. Yet limitations remained. Without understanding bacteria, people often misattributed causes and overtreated symptoms. Overly abrasive powders wore enamel thin. Excessive scrubbing exposed sensitive inner layers of teeth. Treatments relieved short-term issues while creating long-term damage. Still, these methods represented the best available solutions. They reflected careful observation, experimentation, and refinement over centuries. People learned what reduced pain, what prevented odor, and what extended the useful life of teeth. Perhaps most striking is how familiar many of these practices feel. Scrubbing, whitening, freshening breath, removing debris. The goals of oral hygiene have changed little. What evolved were the materials, the tools, and the understanding of why these methods worked. By the end of the classical era, tooth cleaning was deeply embedded in daily routine across much of the known world. It was not a luxury or a novelty, it was a necessity, shaped by culture, diet, and environment. The next great shift would not come from philosophy or ritual, but from material innovation. As societies transitioned into the medieval world, dental care would adapt again, sometimes regressing, sometimes advancing, influenced by religion, medicine, and access to resources. In the next part, we'll explore how people cleaned their teeth during the medieval period, where tradition, superstition, and survival collided in unexpected ways. As the classical world fractured and Europe entered the medieval period, the practice of tooth cleaning did not disappear, but it changed in character and consistency. Knowledge that had once circulated through formal medical texts became fragmented. Access to trained physicians declined for most people, and oral care shifted back into the hands of households, monasteries, and folk healers. What survived was not scientific certainty, but tradition, observation, and necessity. For most medieval people, teeth were still essential tools. Diets were rough and demanding. Bread was dense and coarse, often baked with flour ground on stone mills that left behind fine grit. Meat was tough, vegetables fibrous, and food preservation relied heavily on salting and drying. Teeth endured constant abrasion simply from eating. Cleaning them was not about perfection. It was about keeping them functional for as long as possible. Chew sticks continued to be widely used throughout medieval Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia. Twigs from aromatic or bitter trees were favored, not only because they could be frayed into brush-like fibers, but because their taste and scent helped freshen breath. People noticed that certain woods reduced gum pain or slowed decay, and those preferences became regional traditions. In areas where suitable wood was scarce, people turned to cloth, wool, or fingers to rub teeth clean. Salt remained one of the most common tooth-cleaning substances. It was readily available, mildly abrasive, and believed to strengthen gums. Teeth were rubbed with salt directly or mixed with herbs and ash. While harsh by modern standards, salt helped reduce inflammation and control infection. In a world without antiseptics, this mattered greatly. Charcoal was also widely used. Burned wood or bone was crushed into fine powder and applied to teeth to remove stains and odors. Charcoal absorbed impurities and helped neutralize smells, making it especially useful for breath. However, frequent use wore down enamel, leaving many medieval people with flattened, sensitive teeth later in life. Medieval medicine often framed dental problems through the lens of humoral theory. Tooth pain was believed to arise from imbalances of heat, cold, moisture, or dryness within the body. Cleaning the teeth was only one part of treatment. Diet changes, bloodletting, poultices, and prayer were often prescribed alongside oral care. While some of these practices had little effect, others indirectly helped by reducing inflammation or infection. Monasteries played a surprising role in preserving dental knowledge. Monks valued cleanliness as part of spiritual discipline, and oral hygiene was included in monastic routines. Manuscripts copied in monasteries preserved ancient medical texts that included dental advice. Herbal remedies for tooth pain and gum disease were recorded, refined, and passed down. In the Islamic world during the medieval period, oral hygiene advanced more consistently. The use of the miswak, a natural chew stick made from specific trees, became deeply embedded in daily life. It was used multiple times a day, often before prayer. The miswak cleaned teeth mechanically while releasing antibacterial compounds. Its use was encouraged not only for hygiene, but for spiritual purity. This consistent, frequent cleaning gave people in these regions an advantage in oral health. Travelers and physicians noted lower rates of severe decay compared to some European populations. The method was simple, portable, and effective, demonstrating how cultural habit could rival technological innovation. In medieval Europe, dental care also intersected with social class. Wealthier individuals had access to imported spices and herbs that could be mixed into tooth powders. Cloves, mint, sage, and rosemary were used to freshen breath and soothe gums. These ingredients were expensive, making dental comfort a subtle marker of status. Professional dentistry, however, was rare. Tooth extraction was usually performed by barber surgeons or traveling practitioners. Cleaning was considered preventive, but once pain became severe, removal was often the only option. This reality reinforced the importance of daily care. A neglected tooth could mean agony, infection, or death. Despite the limitations, medieval people were not indifferent to oral hygiene. Bad breath was socially undesirable. Decayed teeth were associated with illness and aging. Clean teeth suggested discipline and vitality. People did what they could with what they had. One of the most important shifts during this period was frequency. While ancient civilizations often cleaned teeth once daily, medieval practices varied widely. Some people cleaned occasionally, others multiple times a day, especially in religious contexts. Oral hygiene became tied to routine rather than innovation. The absence of a toothbrush did not prevent habit formation. People adapted their tools to their schedules, beliefs, and environments. Tooth cleaning remained an everyday act, not a rare intervention. What stands out most is resilience. Knowledge survived through oral tradition, observation, and repetition. Even when scientific understanding regressed or stagnated, practical experience preserved what worked. People may not have known about bacteria, but they knew that cleaning reduced pain. As the medieval world gradually transitioned toward the early modern period, global trade, exploration, and scientific inquiry would begin to reshape dental care again. New substances, new diseases, and new ideas would transform how people understood the mouth. In the next part, we will explore how tooth cleaning evolved as the world opened up. When global exchange introduced sugar, new materials, and eventually the first true ancestors of the modern toothbrush. As the medieval world gave way to the early modern era, tooth cleaning entered a period of dramatic transformation driven not by sudden scientific breakthroughs but by global exchange. Trade routes expanded, empires connected distant regions, and goods that had once been rare curiosities became everyday commodities. Among these new arrivals was sugar, a substance that would permanently alter human dental health and force oral hygiene practices to evolve faster than ever before. Before sugar became widespread, tooth decay existed but progressed slowly. Diets were coarse, fibrous, and low in refined carbohydrates. When sugar entered Europe through trade with the Middle East and later through colonial plantations, it changed everything. Teeth were suddenly exposed to a substance that fed decay aggressively. Cavities became more common, more painful, and more destructive. For the first time in history, tooth decay was no longer a slow process measured over decades. It could advance rapidly, even in youth. People noticed. By the 16th and 17th centuries, tooth pain became a widespread complaint across social classes. Teeth that had survived years of wear now succumbed to rot. Cleaning methods that once sufficed suddenly felt inadequate. Oral hygiene became urgent rather than optional. In response, tooth cleaning substances grew stronger. Abrasive powders became more aggressive. Crushed brick, coral, pumice, and even metal filings were added to tooth powders in an attempt to scrub away decay. These mixtures removed stains and plaque effectively, but at a terrible cost. Enamel wore away faster than ever, exposing sensitive inner layers and accelerating tooth loss. People were fighting decay with force, unaware that they were damaging the very structure they were trying to protect. At the same time, people experimented with chemical solutions. Vinegar, wine, and acidic herbal infusions were used to rinse the mouth, dissolving residue and neutralizing odors. These rinses killed some bacteria, but weakened enamel further. The immediate sensation of cleanliness reinforced their use, even when long-term damage followed. Chew sticks remained common, but their role shifted. No longer sufficient on their own, they were combined with powders, rinses, and scrapers. Teeth were cleaned more frequently and more aggressively, reflecting the growing threat of decay. This period also saw the rise of printed books on health and hygiene. Advice that had once circulated orally now reached wider audiences. Household manuals included instructions for tooth powders, mouth rinses, and gum treatments. Dental care became something people discussed openly, shared recipes for, and modified according to taste and availability. Fresh breath became increasingly important in social settings. As urban populations grew denser, people interacted more closely and more often. Unpleasant breath was no longer a private inconvenience. It was a public offense. Tooth cleaning served social survival as much as physical health. In Asia, tooth cleaning traditions continued evolving along their own paths. In China, stiff bristles made from animal hair were attached to handles made of bone or bamboo, forming tools that resembled early toothbrushes. These brushes were not widespread among the general population. but they represented a conceptual leap, the separation of tool from substance. Instead of chewing a stick or rubbing powder with fingers, people could now scrub with purpose-built bristles. These early brushes spread slowly through trade routes. They were expensive, fragile, and unfamiliar. Most people still relied on older methods, but the idea had been introduced, and it would not disappear. Meanwhile, in Europe, dentistry began to emerge as a recognizable profession. Barber surgeons offered tooth extraction, cleaning, and pain relief. Though crude, these services reinforced the idea that dental care required specialized attention. Tooth cleaning was no longer solely a household responsibility. It could be delegated for a price. Yet even professional care emphasized cleaning and scraping rather than prevention. Plaque and visible decay were treated, but the underlying causes remained misunderstood. Sugar consumption continued rising, especially among the wealthy, who suffered disproportionately from decay. Rotten teeth became a paradoxical marker of status. The wealthy responded by cleaning even more aggressively. Elaborate tooth-cleaning rituals emerged among elites, using imported powders and fragrant rinses. These practices focused on appearance as much as health. White teeth became fashionable, even as decay lurked beneath the surface. Across cultures, a pattern emerged. Tooth cleaning was intensifying, but without scientific understanding, people were fighting symptoms rather than causes. Methods became harsher, not smarter. Relief was immediate, damage delayed. Still, this period laid crucial groundwork. People recognized the importance of regular cleaning. They experimented widely. They documented what they did. Dental care entered written culture in a way it never had before. Most importantly, the limitations of existing methods were becoming obvious. Teeth were still being lost too early. Pain was still common. Infection remained dangerous. The need for better tools was undeniable. The stage was set for a turning point. As science advanced and understanding of the body improved, tooth cleaning would begin shifting from tradition to experimentation, from habit to hygiene. In the next part, we will explore how the 18th century brought the first true attempts to redesign oral care itself, setting the foundation for the toothbrush as we know it today. By the 18th century, tooth cleaning stood at a crossroads. For thousands of years, people had relied on instinct, tradition, and increasingly aggressive methods to fight decay, pain, and odor. These methods worked just well enough to survive, but not well enough to prevent suffering. Teeth were still lost early, infections still spread, cleaning still caused damage. What was missing was not effort, but understanding. Slowly, that understanding began to change. The Enlightenment brought a shift in how the human body was studied. Observation, experimentation, and documentation started replacing inherited belief. Physicians began questioning long-held assumptions about disease, decay, and hygiene. Teeth, once treated as separate from the rest of the body or explained through imbalance and superstition, were now examined as physical structures with identifiable causes of deterioration. This shift did not happen overnight. Tooth cleaning practices remained rooted in older traditions, but new ideas crept in. Dentists and physicians began noticing that decay occurred in specific areas, often where food remained trapped. They observed that smoother surfaces decayed more slowly than rough ones. These observations hinted at the role of residue and contact, even if bacteria were not yet understood. As sugar consumption continued to rise, the inadequacy of traditional methods became more obvious. Scrubbing harder was not solving the problem. In fact, enamel damage from abrasive powders was accelerating decay. Some practitioners began recommending gentler cleaning methods, though without fully understanding why gentleness mattered. This period saw the rise of early dental treatises. These books described teeth anatomically, distinguishing enamel, dentin, and pulp. For the first time, people began to understand that once the inner structure of the tooth was exposed, pain and infection became far more likely. This realization slowly shifted the goal of tooth cleaning. The objective was no longer just removal of debris and stains, but preservation of enamel. Tools also began to evolve. In China, bristle brushes had existed for centuries, but they were largely unknown in Europe. By the early 18th century, travelers and merchants introduced versions of these brushes westward. Handles were made of bone, wood, or ivory. Bristles were stiff animal hairs, often from pigs. These brushes were crude, expensive, and uncomfortable, but they represented a breakthrough. For the first time, teeth could be cleaned with a tool designed specifically for scrubbing rather than chewing or rubbing. Early adopters were often the wealthy or medically curious. These brushes were not yet everyday objects. They required maintenance, dried poorly, and harbored bacteria. Yet they offered something revolutionary: controlled abrasion. Instead of grinding teeth with powders, users could scrub gently with bristles and use milder cleaning substances. Tooth powders changed in response. Some practitioners began recommending less abrasive mixtures, combining chalk, soap, or mild mineral powders with flavoring agents. These early formulas aimed to clean without excessive damage. Soap, though unpleasant in taste, helped dissolve greasy residue and kill microbes. Taste was secondary to effectiveness. Public perception of dental hygiene also shifted. Clean teeth became associated with refinement and modernity. Tooth cleaning was no longer just a private act of survival. It was a mark of being informed, disciplined, and civilized. This social pressure encouraged experimentation with new tools and methods. At the same time, dentistry slowly separated from general surgery. Dedicated dental practitioners emerged, focusing exclusively on oral health. They promoted regular cleaning, inspection, and early intervention. Though their methods were still limited, their presence reinforced the idea that teeth deserved specialized care. Despite these advances, tooth decay remained widespread. Without understanding bacteria or acids, prevention was incomplete. Cleaning helped, but it could not fully counteract sugar-rich diets. Pain management remained crude. Extractions were common. Tooth loss was still expected with age, yet the direction of change was clear. Tooth cleaning was becoming less brutal and more deliberate. People were beginning to value preservation over punishment. The idea that teeth could last a lifetime began to feel conceivable, even if it remained rare. Importantly, older methods did not vanish immediately. Chew sticks, cloth rubbing, and powders continued alongside brushes. For many people, access to new tools was limited by cost and availability. Dental hygiene evolved unevenly, shaped by class, geography, and education. This coexistence of old and new methods highlights a key truth about human behavior. Innovation does not replace tradition instantly. It layers over it, gradually reshaping habits as advantages become clear. Tooth cleaning followed this pattern precisely. By the end of the 18th century, the groundwork for modern oral hygiene had been laid. The toothbrush existed in recognizable form. Gentler cleaning principles were emerging. Dental anatomy was better understood. What remained was a crucial missing piece: knowledge of what actually caused decay. That knowledge would arrive in the 19th century, transforming tooth cleaning from trial and error into science. It would change not only how people brushed their teeth, but why they did so. In the next part, we'll explore how scientific discovery finally revealed the invisible enemy in the mouth, and how that revelation reshaped oral hygiene forever. The 19th century marked the moment when tooth cleaning finally crossed a critical threshold. For the first time, people were no longer guessing blindly at the causes of decay. Scientific inquiry, driven by microscopes and laboratory experimentation, began revealing what had been invisible for all of human history. The enemy was not worms, bad humors, or moral weakness. It was living organisms, thriving in the warm, moist environment of the mouth. This discovery changed everything. As germ theory gained traction, researchers observed that tiny organisms lived on teeth, feeding on food particles and producing acids that slowly dissolved enamel. Tooth decay was no longer mysterious, it was chemical and biological. Cleaning the teeth was no longer just about removing visible debris or masking odor. It was about disrupting an ecosystem. This new understanding reshaped oral hygiene almost immediately. Scrubbing harder was no longer the goal. Scrubbing smarter was. Excessively abrasive powders were reevaluated. Enamel was recognized as irreplaceable. Once lost, it did not regenerate. Tooth cleaning had to preserve it. Dentists began recommending gentler materials and more frequent cleaning. The idea of brushing twice a day emerged during this period, not as a tradition, but as a response to bacterial growth patterns. Bacteria multiplied rapidly after meals. Regular cleaning interrupted that cycle. Frequency mattered more than force. The toothbrush itself evolved rapidly. Handles became more ergonomic. Bristles were arranged more evenly. Though still made from animal hair, they were trimmed and softened to reduce damage. Brushes were no longer novelties. They were increasingly marketed to middle-class households as essential tools of health. Toothpaste, however, lagged behind. Most people still used powders or homemade mixtures. Commercial toothpastes began appearing in jars, thick pastes made from chalk, soap, and flavoring oils. These pastes cleaned effectively but were not yet standardized. Taste improved gradually as manufacturers recognized that people were more likely to clean their teeth if the experience was tolerable. Public health messaging also changed. Dental hygiene became part of broader conversations about cleanliness, sanitation, and disease prevention. As cities grew crowded, concerns about contagion intensified. Clean bodies, clean water, and clean mouths were framed as defenses against illness. Toothbrushing shifted from personal preference to social responsibility. This period also saw the rise of dental education. Formal dental schools emerged, replacing apprenticeship-based learning. Dentists trained in anatomy, pathology, and hygiene began educating patients about prevention rather than simply treating pain. The concept of routine dental care took hold, though access remained limited. Despite these advances, oral hygiene was not yet universal. Rural populations, the poor and children, often lacked access to brushes and professional care. Tooth decay remained widespread. Sugar consumption continued climbing, fueled by industrial food production. Candy, jam, and sweetened drinks became more common, especially among children. Yet something fundamental had changed. For the first time, people understood that decay was not inevitable. It was preventable. Teeth could be preserved if cleaned properly and consistently. This realization transformed attitudes toward the mouth. Toothbrushing became a habit taught to children. Parents were encouraged to supervise cleaning. Schools began promoting hygiene. Advertisements framed brushing as modern, responsible, and scientific. The mouth became a site of moral instruction as well as health. Interestingly, older methods did not disappear entirely. Chew sticks and cloth cleaning persisted in many parts of the world, especially where toothbrushes remained expensive. However, these methods were increasingly compared against the new scientific standard. Toothbrushing with bristles became the benchmark. The shift also influenced how people perceived aging. Tooth loss was no longer accepted as inevitable. Adults began expecting to keep their teeth longer. When decay occurred, it was seen as failure of care rather than fate. This psychological shift mattered as much as any tool. By the late 19th century, the foundations of modern oral hygiene were firmly in place. Toothbrushes existed in recognizable form. Toothpaste was emerging. Bacteria were understood as the cause of decay. Prevention had become the central goal. Yet the toothbrush we recognize today was still imperfect. Bristles were stiff and unhygienic. Pastes were inconsistent. Dental care remained unevenly distributed. The next transformation would not come from medicine alone, but from industrial manufacturing and mass marketing. In the next part, we will explore how the 20th century turned toothbrushing into a global daily ritual, standardizing tools, shaping habits, and embedding oral hygiene into modern life in ways no previous era had achieved. The 20th century transformed tooth cleaning from a practice shaped by culture and access into a standardized daily ritual recognized almost everywhere in the world. This shift did not happen simply because science advanced. It happened because science, industry, education, and marketing aligned in a way that permanently reshaped how people thought about their mouths. For the first time, brushing teeth was not just something people did when they remembered or when pain threatened. It became something people were expected to do, routinely, consistently, and correctly. At the center of this transformation was mass production. Toothbrushes that had once been expensive, fragile objects became cheap, durable, and widely available. Advances in manufacturing allowed brushes to be produced at scale, with standardized shapes and sizes. Handles were designed for grip and control. Bristles were arranged in patterns meant to reach between teeth. Toothbrushes became household objects rather than personal curiosities. One of the most important innovations came with the replacement of animal hair bristles. Early brushes made from pig hair absorbed moisture, harbored bacteria, and varied in stiffness. With the invention of synthetic materials, especially nylon in the 1930s, toothbrushes became more hygienic, more consistent, and more effective. Nylon bristles could be manufactured to specific softness levels, reducing enamel damage while still removing plaque. This single change dramatically improved brushing outcomes. Toothpaste evolved alongside the brush. What had once been homemade powders or crude pastes became carefully formulated products. Scientists experimented with abrasives that cleaned without excessive wear, foaming agents that spread paste evenly, and flavorings that made brushing pleasant rather than punishing. Taste mattered. Mint became dominant not because it cleaned better, but because it signaled freshness and cleanliness. Sensation reinforced habit. Public health campaigns played a crucial role in normalizing toothbrushing. Governments, schools, and health organizations promoted oral hygiene as part of overall health. Posters, pamphlets, and classroom lessons taught children how and when to brush. Brushing twice a day became the standard recommendation. Dental hygiene was framed not as vanity, but as prevention. War unexpectedly accelerated this process. During the World Wars, military organizations recognized that poor dental health affected readiness. Tooth pain sidelined soldiers, infections spread. Armed forces began issuing toothbrushes and toothpaste as standard equipment, teaching recruits proper brushing techniques. Millions of young people returned home with habits they had been trained to follow, spreading those habits into civilian life. Advertising amplified these changes. Toothpaste companies linked brushing to social success, romance, confidence, and professionalism. Clean teeth were associated with modern identity. Bad breath was framed as a social failure. While these messages were often exaggerated, they were effective. Toothbrushing became embedded in daily routine through a mix of fear, aspiration, and habit. Yet, even as brushing became widespread, disparities persisted. Access to dental care remained uneven. Poorer communities suffered higher rates of decay despite brushing. Diet, education, and healthcare access continued to shape outcomes. Toothbrushing alone could not overcome structural inequality. Still, it dramatically reduced suffering compared to earlier eras. Importantly, this modern standard did not erase ancient wisdom. Many principles that had guided tooth cleaning for thousands of years remained relevant. Mechanical removal of debris mattered. Saliva stimulation mattered. Consistency mattered. The toothbrush was not a rejection of the past, but a refinement of it. The global spread of toothbrushing also revealed cultural variation. In many regions, traditional methods like chew sticks continued alongside brushes. In some cases, they proved equally effective. Studies showed that certain natural sticks cleaned teeth as well as toothbrushes when used correctly. This challenged the idea that modern tools were automatically superior, reminding us that effectiveness often depends on habit rather than technology alone. As the century progressed, dental science continued refining recommendations. Brushing technique became as important as frequency. Gentle, thorough cleaning replaced aggressive scrubbing. Flossing was introduced to address areas brushes could not reach. Oral hygiene became a system rather than a single act. By the end of the 20th century, toothbrushing had become one of the most widespread daily behaviors in human history. Children learned it before they could read. Parents enforced it nightly. Dentists evaluated it regularly. The toothbrush, once non-existent, had become indispensable. Yet this modern routine can obscure the long history that preceded it. Toothbrushing feels natural now, almost instinctive, but it is the product of thousands of years of adaptation, experimentation, failure, and learning. People cleaned their teeth long before they understood why it mattered. They suffered, adjusted, and tried again. Understanding this history changes how we see modern hygiene. The toothbrush is not a sudden invention that saved humanity from decay. It is the latest expression of a deeply human impulse to protect the mouth because the mouth sustains life. In the next part, we will step back and examine how effective these pre-toothbrush methods truly were, separating myth from reality and asking a crucial question. Were ancient people doomed to bad teeth? Or did some of their methods work better than we assume? With the rise of modern dentistry, it is easy to assume that everything that came before was ineffective, even primitive. The toothbrush, toothpaste, and dental clinics can make earlier methods feel like desperate guesses in the dark. But when historians, anthropologists, and dentists began examining ancient teeth more closely, a far more complicated picture emerged. In some cases, people who lived thousands of years ago had better oral health than populations in much later periods, despite never owning a toothbrush. The key difference was not effort, but environment. Pre-industrial diets were fundamentally different from modern ones. Refined sugar was rare or non-existent for most of human history. Foods were coarse, fibrous, and required significant chewing, which naturally stimulated saliva and helped cleanse the mouth. Saliva neutralizes acids, washes away debris, and contains minerals that help repair enamel. Ancient diets, though hard on teeth mechanically, were often chemically safer. When researchers examined skeletal remains from hunter-gatherer populations, they found surprisingly low rates of cavities. Teeth showed heavy wear, but fewer deep lesions. The enamel was ground down, but it decayed more slowly. Infections still occurred, but they were less common than expected. This suggests that tooth cleaning methods combined with diet were often sufficient to prevent catastrophic decay. Chew sticks, in particular, proved remarkably effective. Modern studies comparing traditional chew sticks to toothbrushes found that many natural sticks cleaned teeth just as well when used properly. Some even outperformed toothbrushes in reducing gum inflammation. Plants used historically often contained antimicrobial compounds that inhibited bacterial growth. What seemed like a crude tool was actually a chemically active one. Charcoal and ash, though abrasive, also played a role. When used occasionally rather than aggressively, they removed plaque and stains effectively. The problem arose when sugar entered the diet and cleaning intensified. Abrasives that had once been occasional aids became daily weapons against decay, damaging enamel faster than bacteria alone could. Cloth cleaning, finger rubbing, and rinsing were less effective on their own, but they still removed loose debris and stimulated saliva. These methods were often combined rather than used in isolation. Oral hygiene was layered, not singular. People adapted based on what they had access to. The biggest misconception about pre-toothbrush oral care is the idea of neglect. Painful tooth infections leave clear marks on skeletons, but absence of evidence is often overlooked. Many ancient individuals lived long lives without losing all their teeth. Others lost teeth gradually rather than catastrophically. This suggests maintenance, not surrender. However, there were clear limits. Without fluoride, enamel repair was slower. Without precise tools, cleaning between teeth was difficult. Gum disease was common. Tooth wear was severe. People traded decay for abrasion, pain for function. Dental survival was a balancing act. The arrival of sugar disrupted this balance dramatically. When refined carbohydrates became widespread, ancient methods struggled to keep up. What had worked under one dietary condition failed under another. This is why decay exploded in the early modern period, not because people stopped cleaning their teeth, but because their environment changed faster than their methods. Understanding this helps explain why modern oral hygiene focuses so heavily on prevention. Toothbrushing alone is not enough. Diet matters, frequency matters, technique matters. Ancient people did many things right, but they were limited by context. It also challenges the idea that modern people are inherently better at oral care. Today's tools are superior, but our diets are more hostile to teeth than ever before. Sugar exposure is constant. Acidic drinks are common. Without modern hygiene, decay would progress rapidly. In this sense, ancient oral hygiene was not inferior. It was adapted. People cleaned their teeth in ways that matched their world. When that world changed, those methods reached their limits. Recognizing this continuity restores respect to ancient ingenuity. Tooth cleaning was never absent. It evolved alongside diet, culture, and knowledge. The toothbrush did not invent hygiene, it optimized it. In the next part, we will explore some of the most unusual, unexpected, and sometimes shocking tooth-cleaning methods people have used throughout history, revealing just how far humans were willing to go to protect their teeth. When people throughout history faced the limits of their dental knowledge, desperation often bred creativity. Tooth pain was among the most intense and persistent forms of suffering a person could endure, and when ordinary cleaning failed, extraordinary methods followed. Some of these approaches seem shocking today, even disturbing, yet they reveal how seriously people took oral health long before modern dentistry offered safer solutions. Across many cultures, strong chemical substances were used to cleanse the mouth in hopes of stopping decay. Acids, including vinegar and citrus extracts, were commonly applied to teeth to dissolve buildup and whiten enamel. The immediate effect was dramatic. Teeth appeared cleaner, stains vanished, and breath improved. What people could not see was the slow erosion of enamel beneath the surface. Acid softened tooth structure, leaving it vulnerable to rapid decay later. Still, the instant relief and visual improvement made these methods appealing, especially in societies where appearance and breath carried social consequences. Alcohol played a surprising role in tooth cleaning as well. Wine, spirits, and herbal infusions were used as mouth rinses to disinfect the mouth and numb pain. Alcohol reduced bacteria temporarily and dulled nerve sensitivity, providing short-term relief. For people without access to painkillers, this mattered enormously. In some cases, herbs soaked in alcohol were chewed or rubbed directly onto gums to treat inflammation and abscesses. While these practices sometimes reduced infection, they also masked symptoms that signaled deeper problems. Heat was another extreme tool. Heated metal instruments were applied to aching teeth to cauterize nerves or burn away infected tissue. This practice was agonizing, but in a time when untreated infection could spread to the jaw or bloodstream, it was considered preferable to waiting. Fire symbolized purification as much as destruction, and burning pain was sometimes believed to drive out illness. Superstitious practices blended seamlessly with practical ones. In medieval Europe, charms and prayers were recited while cleaning teeth, especially during episodes of pain. The act of cleaning was sometimes paired with religious ritual, reinforcing the belief that illness was both physical and spiritual. While prayer did not remove bacteria, the accompanying cleaning often helped enough to reinforce belief in the ritual's power. Some of the most unusual tooth-cleaning substances came from animals. Powdered bones, antlers, horns, and even ground-up shells were used as abrasives. These materials were hard enough to remove plaque, but unforgiving on enamel. Over time, teeth polished with these powders became flat and thin. People accepted this outcome because decay felt worse than wear. In certain regions, fats and oils were used to coat teeth after cleaning. Animal fat, plant oils, and waxes were applied to create a protective barrier. This practice reduced sensitivity and slowed food adhesion. While not a true preventive measure, it offered comfort and a degree of protection, especially in cold or dry climates where cracked gums were common. Even urine, unpleasant as it sounds, was employed as a tooth-cleaning agent in several ancient societies. Aged urine contains ammonia, which breaks down stains and kills bacteria. People noticed its effectiveness long before understanding chemistry. The method worked well enough to persist for centuries, particularly among those who valued whitening. Effectiveness often outweighed discomfort or disgust. These extreme methods highlight an important truth. People were not careless about their teeth. They were deeply invested in preserving them, even at great cost. The mouth was central to survival, speech, and social interaction. Losing teeth meant losing independence. Suffering through harsh treatments felt justified when the alternative was prolonged agony. Yet these methods also reveal the danger of fighting symptoms without understanding causes. People responded to visible problems with visible force. Stains were scrubbed, pain was burned, odor was masked. Without knowing about bacteria, acids, and enamel regeneration, many solutions solved one problem while creating another. This cycle explains why oral hygiene advanced unevenly. Progress was not linear. Some methods improved health temporarily, then failed under new conditions. Others persisted simply because nothing better existed. People adapted continually, even when adaptation caused harm. What unites these practices is intention. Tooth cleaning was not accidental or neglected. It was pursued aggressively, sometimes excessively. Humans have always cared about their teeth, not because of vanity alone, but because oral health was inseparable from overall well-being. Understanding these extremes also helps explain why modern dentistry emphasizes moderation. Gentle cleaning, controlled abrasion, and preventive care are responses to centuries of overcorrection. The toothbrush represents not just technological improvement, but restraint informed by knowledge. As oral hygiene entered the modern scientific era, the goal shifted from reacting to pain toward preventing it entirely. This shift required not only better tools, but better understanding of daily habits, diet, and long-term consequences. In the next part, we will examine how modern science reinterpreted ancient practices, revealing that some traditional methods were more effective than expected, while others were dangerous mistakes that shaped future guidelines. As modern science began re-examining ancient and pre-modern tooth-cleaning practices, something unexpected happened. Methods once dismissed as primitive or superstitious were reanalyzed with laboratory tools, and the results were not always what researchers expected. Some ancient techniques, though poorly understood at the time, turned out to be surprisingly effective. Others, long trusted, were revealed as quietly destructive. This reevaluation reshaped how historians and dentists alike understood the long evolution of oral hygiene. Chew sticks were among the most striking examples. When researchers tested traditional sticks still used in parts of Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia, they discovered that many contained natural antibacterial compounds. These substances actively inhibited the growth of decay-causing bacteria. The fibrous ends acted as bristles, while the chemical properties of the plant provided protection similar to mild antiseptics. In some cases, gum health improved more than with early modern toothbrushes. This discovery challenged the assumption that technological complexity always equals superiority. Effectiveness depended not only on the tool, but on frequency, technique, and context. Ancient people who used chew sticks multiple times a day were often cleaning their teeth more consistently than modern individuals who brushed once daily with advanced tools. Salt and ash, long used as cleaning agents, also showed mixed results under scientific scrutiny. Salt reduced inflammation and discouraged bacterial growth, especially in the gums. Ash and charcoal absorbed odors and plaque, but their abrasiveness posed long-term risks. Occasional use cleaned effectively. Daily use wore enamel down rapidly. The difference lay in moderation, something ancient users could not quantify scientifically, but often learned through experience. Cloth rubbing and finger cleaning, though gentle, proved insufficient against plaque buildup on their own. However, when combined with fibrous diets and low sugar intake, they often maintained acceptable oral health. This reinforced a critical insight. Tooth cleaning methods cannot be judged independently of diet. Ancient hygiene worked because ancient diets supported it. The introduction of sugar disrupted this balance so completely that older methods appeared to fail overnight. In reality, the environment changed faster than practices could adapt. This pattern repeated throughout history, reminding us that oral hygiene is not static. It must evolve alongside diet and behavior. Modern dentistry also uncovered the hidden cost of extreme historical methods. Acidic rinses whitened teeth temporarily, but weakened enamel irreversibly. Excessive abrasion polished teeth smooth, then hollow. Heat treatments killed nerves but invited infection. These practices worked in the short term and failed catastrophically over time. This realization reframed how progress was understood. Ancient people were not ignorant. They were working with incomplete information. Their solutions were logical responses to immediate problems. Modern hygiene did not replace ancient wisdom. It refined it by identifying where restraint mattered more than force. Understanding this continuity changes how we think about the toothbrush itself. It was not a radical break from the past. It was the result of centuries of experimentation, pain, failure, and adjustment. Every bristle represents lessons learned the hard way. The modern emphasis on gentle brushing, fluoride protection, and preventive care exists precisely because humanity once did the opposite. We scrubbed too hard, we burned too much. We reacted instead of preventing. Oral hygiene evolved by learning when to stop. This historical lens also reveals something deeply human. Across every era, people tried to solve dental problems with the tools and beliefs available to them. They did not wait for perfect understanding. They acted, adjusted, and endured consequences. Progress emerged not from sudden genius, but from persistence. As we move deeper into the modern era, oral hygiene becomes less about invention and more about education. Knowing how to clean teeth correctly becomes as important as having the right tools. Misuse of modern brushes can still cause damage, echoing ancient mistakes in new forms. This continuity reminds us that technology alone does not guarantee health. Habits matter. Context matters. Knowledge matters. Tooth cleaning has always been about balance, between cleaning and protecting, between removing and preserving. In the next part, we will explore how oral hygiene became embedded into childhood, education, and public health campaigns, transforming toothbrushing from a learned skill into a cultural expectation that shaped generations. By the early 20th century, tooth cleaning had moved beyond the private sphere and into the public imagination. What had once been a personal habit shaped by family tradition was now framed as a civic responsibility. Governments, educators, and medical institutions began to treat oral hygiene not merely as a matter of comfort or appearance, but as a public health issue with consequences that extended far beyond the mouth. This shift was driven by hard evidence. Dental surveys revealed alarming levels of decay among children and young adults, especially in rapidly growing urban populations. Poor oral health was linked to malnutrition, missed school days, and chronic infection. In severe cases, untreated dental disease led to life-threatening complications. The mouth was no longer viewed as an isolated system. It was understood as an entry point for disease that could affect the entire body. Schools became one of the primary battlegrounds in this new approach to oral hygiene. Children were taught how to brush their teeth properly, often through demonstrations that emphasized gentle, thorough cleaning rather than aggressive scrubbing. Teachers explained why brushing mattered, linking it to strength, growth, and responsibility. Toothbrushing drills were introduced in some schools, turning hygiene into routine. This emphasis on childhood habits was deliberate. Dentists and public health officials recognized that behavior formed early was more likely to persist into adulthood. Teaching children to brush daily was seen as an investment in future health. Tooth cleaning became part of moral education, reinforcing ideas of discipline, self-care, and social respectability. Advertising amplified these messages. Toothpaste companies targeted parents, warning that failure to care for children's teeth would result in pain, embarrassment, and long-term damage. Fear and aspiration worked together. Clean teeth symbolized good parenting, modern living, and social advancement. Toothbrushing was no longer optional. It was expected. At the same time, dental science continued refining its recommendations. Studies revealed that brushing technique mattered as much as frequency. Gentle circular motions cleaned effectively without harming gums. Excessive pressure caused recession and sensitivity. These findings challenged older assumptions that harder scrubbing equaled better cleaning. Once again, history corrected itself by favoring moderation over force. Fluoride emerged as one of the most significant breakthroughs in dental care. Researchers discovered that communities with naturally fluoridated water had significantly lower rates of tooth decay. Fluoride strengthened enamel, making it more resistant to acid produced by bacteria. When added to toothpaste and water supplies, it dramatically reduced cavities across entire populations. This discovery reshaped tooth cleaning entirely. Brushing was no longer just mechanical removal of plaque. It became a way to deliver protective substances directly to the teeth. Oral hygiene shifted from defense to reinforcement. Teeth were not merely cleaned, they were fortified. Yet even as science advanced, disparities persisted. Access to dental care and hygiene education remained uneven. Rural areas, low-income communities, and marginalized populations experienced higher rates of decay despite public health efforts. Toothbrushing alone could not overcome broader inequalities in diet, healthcare access, and education. This reality highlighted an enduring truth. Oral hygiene does not exist in isolation. It reflects broader social conditions. Ancient methods worked best in ancient contexts. Modern methods work best when supported by modern infrastructure. Tooth cleaning practices succeed or fail based on environment as much as effort. As brushing became normalized, people began to forget that it was once a learned behavior rather than an instinct. The toothbrush felt inevitable, as though humanity had always brushed this way. But history tells a different story. Brushing is the product of centuries of adaptation, trial, and error. It represents accumulated knowledge rather than sudden invention. Understanding this evolution deepens appreciation for modern hygiene. The toothbrush is not simply a tool. It is the endpoint of countless human responses to pain, discomfort, and observation. Every improvement reflects lessons learned from past mistakes. By embedding oral hygiene into education and culture, modern society achieved something unprecedented. Tooth cleaning became automatic. People brushed without thinking, guided by habit rather than fear. This shift reduced suffering on a scale no ancient method could achieve. Yet modern complacency carries its own risks. Over-reliance on technology can obscure the importance of diet, technique, and consistency. Brushing does not negate sugar's effects. It does not replace awareness. The past reminds us that tools work only when used wisely. As we continue this exploration, the next part will examine how modern misconceptions about ancient dental health persist, and how understanding the true history of tooth cleaning challenges assumptions about progress, hygiene, and human adaptability. One of the most persistent misconceptions about oral health is the belief that ancient people universally suffered from terrible teeth simply because they lacked modern tools. This assumption feels intuitive, but it collapses under closer examination. When researchers began comparing dental remains across time periods, they found that tooth decay does not follow a simple upward trajectory toward improvement. Instead, it rises and falls in response to diet, environment, and habit. In some eras, teeth were healthier overall than in later centuries that supposedly benefited from better hygiene. The idea that modern people are automatically better off because they brush their teeth is misleading. Brushing is only one variable in a much larger equation. Ancient diets were low in refined carbohydrates and sugars, which meant bacteria had less fuel to produce enamel-destroying acids. Even without toothbrushes, many people experienced fewer cavities than populations living centuries later when sugar became common, but brushing habits had not yet caught up. This paradox becomes especially clear when examining skeletal remains from medieval and early modern Europe. As sugar consumption increased, decay rates spiked dramatically, even though tooth cleaning methods had not changed significantly. People were still scrubbing, rinsing, chewing sticks, and using powders. The problem was not neglect, it was mismatch. Their tools were designed for one dietary environment and forced to function in another. Understanding this mismatch reframes how we interpret ancient hygiene. People did not fail to adapt out of ignorance or laziness. They adapted as quickly as observation allowed. What they could not see were microscopic processes accelerating beneath the surface. The mouth had become chemically hostile in ways no previous generation had encountered. Modern science often portrays the toothbrush as the turning point, but this oversimplifies history. The toothbrush became effective not merely because it existed, but because it was paired with fluoride, gentler abrasives, better understanding of bacteria, and changes in public behavior. Remove any one of these factors and outcomes deteriorate. This realization also exposes a modern vulnerability. Today's diets are far more aggressive toward teeth than ancient ones. Sugars and acids appear in nearly every meal, often in hidden forms. Brushing compensates, but only partially. Without consistent hygiene, modern teeth deteriorate faster than ancient ones ever did. Our dependence on tools is greater precisely because our environment is harsher. Another myth worth examining is the belief that ancient people simply accepted tooth loss as part of aging. While tooth loss was common, it was not embraced. Historical records repeatedly show attempts to delay it. People cleaned their teeth, treated pain, and sought remedies long before extraction became unavoidable. Tooth loss represented failure, not fate. Ancient texts describe sorrow over losing teeth, embarrassment over missing smiles, and fear of chewing difficulty. These emotions mirror modern concerns. Teeth have always mattered, not just for eating, but for identity. Oral hygiene was about dignity as much as survival. The persistence of oral care across cultures reveals something deeper. Humans instinctively protect their mouths because the mouth connects to nourishment, communication, and social presence. Tooth cleaning was never optional, it was instinctual, shaped by necessity. This instinct survived even when methods caused harm. Abrasive powders damaged enamel, but people continued using them because the alternative felt worse. Pain relief and cleanliness mattered more than invisible long-term damage. This mirrors modern behavior in subtle ways. People still overbrush, whiten excessively, and erode enamel chasing immediate results. History repeats itself when lessons are forgotten. Recognizing these parallels helps demystify progress. Advances in oral hygiene did not replace flawed human behavior. They redirected it. Modern dentistry channels the impulse to clean into safer forms. But the impulse itself is ancient. Another important correction concerns class differences. Ancient elites often had worse teeth than commoners because they consumed more sugar, honey, wine, and processed foods. Common people, eating simpler diets, often retained functional teeth longer. This pattern persisted well into the 19th century. Oral health reflected privilege in unexpected ways. This challenges the idea that wealth always equaled health. Access to sugar-harmed teeth long before access to dentists could repair them. Tooth cleaning habits existed across classes, but diet dictated outcomes more strongly than tools. When viewed through this lens, oral hygiene history becomes less about invention and more about balance. The most effective dental care has always aligned with diet, habit, and environment. When those factors align, even simple tools work well. When they do not, even advanced tools struggle. This understanding also reframes modern advice. Brushing is necessary, but not sufficient. Frequency matters, but so does timing. Technique matters, but so does what is eaten between brushes. Ancient people intuitively grasped some of these relationships, even without scientific language. Their knowledge was experiential rather than theoretical. They learned through pain, relief, and repetition. Modern people learn through instruction and data, but the underlying goal remains unchanged: preserve teeth long enough to live comfortably. As this documentary continues, the next part will explore how oral hygiene practices diverged across cultures in the modern world, revealing that even today, the toothbrush is not the only effective method, and that ancient practices still survive for good reason. Even as the toothbrush became dominant in much of the modern world, oral hygiene did not evolve along a single uniform path. Different cultures continued adapting tooth cleaning practices based on environment, resources, and tradition. This divergence reveals an important truth that history often obscures. There has never been only one correct way to clean teeth. Effectiveness has always depended on context. In many parts of Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia, traditional chew sticks remained in daily use well into the modern era, even as toothbrushes became widely available elsewhere. These sticks were not used out of resistance to modernity, but because they worked. People trusted them because they had worked for generations. Scientific analysis later confirmed what experience had already proven. Many of these plants contained compounds that reduced bacteria, strengthened gums, and freshened breath. What made these methods particularly effective was frequency. Chew sticks were portable and convenient. They could be used multiple times a day, after meals, before prayer, or during rest. This constant maintenance often outperformed the once-a-day brushing common in early modern Europe. Oral hygiene was woven into daily rhythm rather than confined to morning or night. In contrast, industrialized societies increasingly treated toothbrushing as a scheduled task. Morning and evening routines replaced constant attention. While this was sufficient when combined with toothpaste and fluoride, it reduced flexibility. Oral hygiene became something people checked off rather than integrated naturally. This contrast highlights a recurring pattern in human behavior. When tools become more specialized, habits often become more rigid. Simpler tools encourage adaptation. Neither approach is inherently superior. They succeed or fail depending on consistency. Cultural attitudes toward the mouth also differed. In some societies, oral hygiene was linked closely to ritual purity. Cleaning the mouth was as much about spiritual readiness as physical health. This gave tooth cleaning moral weight, increasing compliance without scientific explanation. In other cultures, oral hygiene was framed primarily as cosmetic or medical, shaping motivation differently. These differing motivations mattered. People clean their teeth more reliably when the act aligns with values they already hold. Ancient practices succeeded in part because they were integrated into belief systems rather than imposed externally. Modern hygiene relies more heavily on education and persuasion, which can fail when motivation fades. The persistence of traditional methods also exposed a limitation of modern assumptions. The toothbrush is not universally superior in every context. In areas without clean water, toothpaste, or regular access to dental care, chew sticks can be more practical and hygienic. They do not require storage, replacement heads, or additional products. Their simplicity is an advantage. This realization has led some modern dental researchers to reevaluate ancient practices not as relics, but as alternatives. Oral hygiene is not one size fits all. The goal is clean teeth and healthy gums, not loyalty to a specific tool. At the same time, globalization has blurred these distinctions. Toothbrushes and toothpaste are now available almost everywhere. Traditional methods coexist with modern ones, often used interchangeably. This hybrid approach reflects the long history of oral hygiene itself, layered, adaptive, and resilient. Understanding this diversity challenges the idea that progress always means replacement. Sometimes it means integration. Ancient wisdom and modern science can coexist, reinforcing each other rather than competing. This perspective also reframes how we evaluate ancient ingenuity. People were not waiting for modern tools to save them. They were actively solving problems with what they had. The toothbrush did not invent oral hygiene. It refined it under new conditions. Recognizing this continuity helps us avoid repeating past mistakes. Overconfidence in tools can lead to neglect of habits. Excessive focus on whitening and aesthetics can damage enamel, echoing ancient overuse of abrasives. History warns that effectiveness lies in balance, not extremes. As modern society continues pushing for whiter teeth and instant results, ancient lessons regain relevance. Gentle cleaning, frequent maintenance, and respect for enamel remain as important now as they were centuries ago. Technology changes, but biology does not. The mouth remains a delicate environment. Bacteria adapt, diets fluctuate, habits evolve. Oral hygiene must adapt continuously, just as it always has. The toothbrush is not the end point of this story. It is one chapter in an ongoing process. In the next part, we will explore how modern obsessions with whitening, perfection, and cosmetic dentistry echo ancient desires, and how the pursuit of perfect teeth sometimes leads people back toward the same mistakes their ancestors once made. As modern dentistry advanced, something curious began to happen. The focus of oral hygiene quietly shifted from health to appearance. Clean teeth were no longer enough. Teeth were expected to be white, uniform, and flawless. This obsession was not new. It echoed desires that had existed for thousands of years. Ancient Romans scrubbed stains away obsessively. Medieval elites sought fresh breath and bright smiles. The difference was scale. Modern technology amplified those desires, sometimes at the expense of long-term health. Tooth whitening became one of the most popular dental practices of the modern era. Bleaching agents promised rapid transformation, turning stained enamel bright white in days or even hours. These treatments delivered immediate results, reinforcing the idea that teeth could be perfected rather than maintained. But just as in the past, speed came with consequences. Whitening agents weakened enamel, increased sensitivity, and made teeth more vulnerable to decay if overused. This pattern mirrors ancient history almost exactly. When people relied on acids, abrasives, and harsh powders, teeth looked cleaner at first, only to deteriorate later. The lesson had been learned before, forgotten, and learned again. The impulse to prioritize immediate appearance over long-term health proved remarkably persistent. Modern toothpaste formulations reflect this tension. Some emphasize abrasion and whitening. Others focus on sensitivity and protection. The variety itself reveals uncertainty. Oral hygiene has never been static. It adapts to cultural priorities as much as biological reality. Social media and advertising intensified this shift. Perfect smiles became symbols of success, confidence, and desirability. Teeth were no longer just functional. They were aesthetic assets. This pressure influenced brushing habits, whitening frequency, and dental procedures. People brushed harder, whitened more often, and pursued cosmetic interventions earlier in life. Dentists began noticing patterns familiar from history. Enamel erosion increased. Gum recession became more common. Sensitivity complaints rose. The same biological limits that constrained ancient methods constrained modern ones. Teeth could only endure so much manipulation. At the same time, preventive dentistry continued improving. Sealants, fluoride treatments, and early intervention reduced decay dramatically when used correctly. These advances demonstrated that long-term oral health depended less on extreme cleaning and more on consistency and moderation. Once again, balance emerged as the guiding principle. The contrast between cosmetic desire and preventive care reveals a deeper truth about human behavior. People respond more strongly to visible results than invisible protection. Cleanliness that feels dramatic is more satisfying than protection that works quietly. This bias shaped ancient practices and continues shaping modern ones. Understanding this pattern helps explain why ancient mistakes resurface. History does not repeat because knowledge disappears. It repeats because human impulses remain stable. The desire to fix problems quickly, to improve appearance instantly, often overrides caution. Yet history also shows correction. When damage becomes widespread, practices change. Excessive abrasion fell out of favor. Acid rinses disappeared. Today, gentler whitening methods and enamel protective formulations are gaining attention. Progress emerges through feedback, not perfection. This cycle of innovation, overuse, and correction has defined oral hygiene across millennia. Tooth cleaning has always evolved through trial, error, and adjustment. The toothbrush did not end this process. It simply made mistakes safer and recovery more likely. Modern dentistry now emphasizes education alongside treatment. Patients are taught not just how to brush, but why technique matters. Overbrushing is discouraged. Whitening is moderated. Preventive care is prioritized. These messages echo lessons learned slowly through centuries of experience. Yet education alone does not eliminate pressure. Cultural expectations continue pushing toward perfection. Teeth remain visible symbols of health and identity. Oral hygiene exists at the intersection of biology, culture, and psychology. Recognizing this intersection deepens our understanding of why ancient practices persisted even when flawed. People cleaned their teeth not because they misunderstood biology, but because they responded to social and personal needs. The same forces operate today. As we approach the final sections of this documentary, the long arc of oral hygiene becomes clear. Tooth cleaning did not begin with the toothbrush, and it does not end with it. It is an ongoing negotiation between what works, what feels good, and what people believe matters. In the next part, we will step back and trace the entire journey once more, connecting ancient habits, medieval improvisation, scientific discovery, and modern routine into a single continuous story. One that reveals how deeply human the act of brushing our teeth truly is. When the entire history of tooth cleaning is viewed as a single, continuous process, a striking pattern emerges. Every major shift in oral hygiene did not begin with invention, but with discomfort. Pain came first. Frustration followed. Only then did people adapt. This cycle repeated across cultures, eras, and technologies, revealing something fundamental about human behavior. We do not change habits because improvement is possible. We change because suffering becomes unavoidable. For most of history, tooth cleaning evolved reactively rather than proactively. People cleaned their teeth more aggressively only after decay worsened. They experimented with new substances only after old ones failed. This pattern explains why innovation often lagged behind need. Without understanding bacteria, acids, or enamel structure, people relied on what they could observe directly: stains, pain, swelling, and odor. Oral hygiene addressed what was visible, not what was happening beneath the surface. This limitation shaped every historical method. Chew sticks cleaned surfaces and stimulated gums but could not reach deep fissures. Abrasive powders removed plaque but damaged enamel. Acid rinses whitened teeth but weakened them. Each solution solved one problem while creating another. Progress occurred not through perfect solutions, but through gradual reduction of harm. The toothbrush represents a rare moment where tool design aligned with biological reality. Bristles provided mechanical cleaning without requiring extreme force. Paste delivered active ingredients evenly. Frequency replaced intensity. But even this alignment required centuries of trial to refine. Early brushes were too stiff, early pastes too abrasive, early habits too aggressive. Only through correction did modern standards emerge. This long process challenges the assumption that modern hygiene is the result of superior intelligence rather than accumulated experience. The toothbrush did not appear because people suddenly became smarter. It appeared because they became more informed by failure. Every improvement in oral hygiene is built on countless damaged teeth, endured infections, and learned limits. Recognizing this lineage changes how we evaluate ancient practices. They were not foolish, they were constrained. People worked within the boundaries of available knowledge, materials, and belief systems. They adapted as quickly as observation allowed. When something reduced pain, it was preserved. When it worsened suffering, it was eventually abandoned. This process mirrors evolution itself. Successful behaviors persist. Harmful ones fade, but the timeline is slow and the cost is high. Oral hygiene evolved not through planning, but through endurance. Modern society benefits enormously from this inherited knowledge, yet it risks forgetting how fragile that knowledge is. Brushing feels automatic now, but habit can decay just as teeth do. When routines weaken, problems return quickly. The bacteria in the mouth have not changed. They remain opportunistic, persistent, and adaptive. Hygiene must remain equally persistent. This reality explains why oral health remains a public health concern, despite advanced tools. Technology simplifies cleaning, but it does not remove responsibility. Brushing poorly with modern tools can still cause damage. Overbrushing can erode enamel. Neglect invites decay. History reminds us that tools are only as effective as the habits that guide them. Another lesson emerges from this long view. Oral hygiene has always been a social behavior. People cleaned their teeth because of pain, but also because of proximity. Smell mattered, appearance mattered, interaction mattered. The mouth is not hidden, it is constantly on display. This social pressure reinforced hygiene long before scientific explanation existed. In modern times, this pressure has intensified. Smiles are photographed, shared, scrutinized. Teeth are judged instantly. This visibility sustains hygiene habits, but it can also distort priorities. Appearance can overshadow health, pushing people toward unnecessary procedures. Once again, history repeats its warnings. Understanding this helps reframe modern dental advice. The goal is not perfection, but preservation. Teeth are meant to function, not impress. Longevity matters more than brightness. Comfort matters more than uniformity. These principles echo ancient wisdom filtered through modern understanding. When ancient people cleaned their teeth, they were not thinking about cavities or plaque indices. They were thinking about survival, dignity, and relief. Those motivations still exist, even if the language has changed. The continuity is unmistakable. As this documentary moves toward its final parts, the focus shifts from what people did to what their behavior reveals. Tooth cleaning is one of the few daily acts shared across nearly all human societies. It crosses time, culture, and technology. Its persistence speaks to its importance. The toothbrush is not a symbol of modern superiority. It is a symbol of continuity. It represents humanity's refusal to accept suffering as inevitable. Every scrub, every rinse, every experiment reflects that refusal. In the next part, we will bring this history closer to the present moment, examining how modern lifestyles challenge oral hygiene in new ways and why ancient lessons may be more relevant now than ever before. As oral hygiene entered the modern age, it encountered a challenge no previous generation had faced: abundance. Ancient people struggled with scarcity, limited food choices, limited tools, limited materials. Modern society faces the opposite problem. Sugar is everywhere. Acidic drinks are common. Snacking is constant. The mouth is exposed to decay-causing conditions far more frequently than it ever was in the past, even as tools for cleaning have become more advanced than ever before. This contradiction lies at the heart of modern dental problems. Teeth are biologically the same as they were thousands of years ago, but the environment surrounding them has changed radically. Ancient methods worked because exposure to harmful substances was intermittent. Modern habits expose teeth to acids and sugars continuously. Brushing compensates, but only partially. Oral hygiene has become defensive rather than merely preventive. This shift explains why modern dentistry emphasizes frequency and timing so heavily. Brushing twice a day is no longer a luxury. It is a necessity created by modern diets. Even then, decay persists. Teeth are under constant chemical assault, and hygiene routines struggle to keep pace. History helps explain why this feels exhausting. Ancient oral hygiene was embedded naturally into daily life. Chew sticks were used after meals. Rinsing occurred throughout the day. Cleaning was distributed rather than concentrated. Modern routines compress hygiene into brief windows, leaving long periods of exposure unaddressed. This compression places enormous pressure on technique. A few minutes of brushing must undo hours of damage. When brushing is rushed, skipped, or done incorrectly, problems accumulate quickly. This is not failure of discipline. It is mismatch between biology and lifestyle. Understanding this mismatch reframes modern advice. The solution is not necessarily brushing harder or whitening more aggressively. It is reducing exposure and increasing gentle maintenance. Ancient people did this intuitively by eating fibrous foods, chewing constantly, and cleaning frequently with simple tools. Modern people must recreate that balance consciously. This is why ancient practices are resurfacing in new forms. Sugar-free chewing gums stimulate saliva much like fibrous foods once did. Mouth rinsing after meals mimics ancient water rinses. Interdental cleaning addresses areas ancient chew sticks reached naturally. Modern hygiene quietly borrows from the past. The persistence of gum disease, despite widespread brushing, also reflects this imbalance. Gums evolved to be stimulated by constant chewing and cleaning. Modern soft diets deprive them of that stimulation. Gentle brushing alone may not be enough. Ancient methods inadvertently supported gum health through mechanical engagement. This realization has led dentists to rethink what effective hygiene looks like. The goal is no longer to scrub teeth into submission, but to support the mouth's natural defenses. Saliva flow, pH balance, and microbial diversity matter as much as plaque removal. Once again, history aligns with biology. Ancient people did not understand saliva chemically, but they understood its importance experientially. Dry mouths were uncomfortable. Fresh mouths felt healthy. Practices that stimulated saliva persisted because they worked. Modern products attempt to replicate these effects artificially. Toothpastes include enzymes. Mouthwashes balance pH. Yet the underlying principle remains ancient. Work with the body, not against it. Another modern challenge is overconfidence. Because tools feel advanced, people assume protection is guaranteed. This assumption mirrors past mistakes. Ancient people believed harsh cleaning ensured safety. Modern people believe branded products do the same. Both beliefs ignore the need for moderation and understanding. History repeatedly teaches that oral hygiene succeeds when habits align with reality rather than expectation. Teeth do not care about marketing or intention. They respond only to chemistry, pressure, and time. As lifestyles continue evolving, oral hygiene must evolve too. New foods, new habits, and new technologies introduce new challenges. The past offers guidance not by providing answers, but by revealing patterns. When conditions change, methods must change with them. This long view also invites humility. Modern society benefits from centuries of accumulated experience, yet it remains vulnerable to the same errors: overuse, neglect, impatience. Progress is not immunity. It is responsibility. Tooth cleaning, at its core, remains a simple act performed in response to a complex environment. That tension has defined oral hygiene since the beginning of human history. The toothbrush is a tool, not a solution. The solution lies in understanding. In the final parts of this documentary, we will draw these insights together into a broader reflection on what the history of tooth cleaning reveals about humanity itself, our adaptability, our persistence, and our willingness to learn slowly from discomfort. When we strip away the tools, the techniques, and the timelines, the history of tooth cleaning reveals something far larger than hygiene. It reveals how humans respond to discomfort when the solution is not obvious. Tooth pain is intimate, persistent, and impossible to ignore. It intrudes on eating, speaking, and resting. Across history, that pain forced people to experiment, adapt, and persist even when understanding was incomplete. Oral hygiene is not a story of luxury. It is a story of necessity. Unlike many medical problems, dental issues could not be postponed. A broken bone might heal. A fever might pass. But an infected tooth often worsened relentlessly. This urgency explains why people were willing to try extreme measures, harsh substances, and painful procedures. It also explains why tooth cleaning became habitual long before it became scientific. Habit offered the only reliable defense against an unpredictable threat. This urgency also shaped how knowledge spread. Oral hygiene techniques were shared quickly because their effects were immediate. When something reduced pain, it was remembered. When it failed, it was abandoned. Tooth cleaning evolved through communal testing rather than formal instruction. Villages, families, and trades passed along what worked, often without knowing why. This pattern of shared experience is one of the most important engines of human progress. Long before laboratories and textbooks, people learned by watching each other suffer less. Tooth cleaning sits squarely within this tradition. It advanced through collective observation, not isolated genius. Even the toothbrush reflects this process. It did not appear fully formed. It emerged gradually, shaped by countless small adjustments. Bristles were softened after gums bled. Handles were shaped after hands cramped. Pastes were reformulated after teeth became sensitive. Every improvement responded to feedback from real mouths. This feedback loop still operates today. When modern dental practices cause harm, they are revised. When habits fail, new recommendations appear. The process never ends because conditions never stabilize. Diets change, lifespans lengthen, expectations rise. Oral hygiene must adapt continuously. This adaptability highlights a key misconception about ancient people. They are often portrayed as passive recipients of disease, helpless without modern science. In reality, they were active problem solvers operating under severe constraints. Their methods were not foolish. They were rational responses to limited information and urgent need. Ancient people did not ignore oral hygiene because they did not value health. They valued it deeply. They simply lacked tools to see microscopic causes, yet even without microscopes, they recognized patterns. Clean mouths hurt less. Dirty mouths smelled worse. Certain plants soothed gums. Certain habits prolonged comfort. This observational intelligence should not be underestimated. The persistence of oral hygiene across civilizations demonstrates how deeply human this behavior is. Wherever people lived, they cleaned their teeth. The methods differed, but the intent did not. This universality suggests that caring for the mouth is not a cultural quirk. It is an instinct shaped by survival. Modern oral hygiene often feels detached from this instinct because it is abstracted by products and routines. Brushing becomes mechanical. Toothpaste becomes a commodity. The original motivation, avoiding pain, fades into the background until discomfort returns. History reminds us why these habits exist in the first place. When people forget the reason behind a habit, they often misuse it. Overbrushing, excessive whitening, and neglect are all symptoms of disconnection. Ancient people cleaned their teeth with urgency because consequences were immediate. Modern people sometimes clean out of obligation, without awareness. This shift carries risks. Reconnecting with the history of tooth cleaning restores context. It reframes brushing as a protective act rather than a cosmetic one. It reminds us that teeth are not decorative objects, but living structures with limits. Enamel does not regenerate. Gums respond to pressure. Balance matters. This perspective also tempers judgment. When people neglect oral hygiene, it is easy to label them careless. History suggests a more complex reality. Habits depend on environment, education, access, and belief. Ancient people cleaned their teeth without instruction because pain taught them to. Modern people must learn without that same immediacy. This is why education remains critical. Understanding why we brush matters as much as knowing how. Without understanding, habits weaken. Without habits, tools fail. History offers the proof. As we approach the final parts of this documentary, the story of tooth cleaning becomes a mirror. It reflects how humans respond to slow threats, how they balance short-term relief against long-term preservation, and how they learn gradually from discomfort. The toothbrush, humble and ubiquitous, is the product of thousands of years of experimentation, failure, and persistence. It is not merely a tool. It is a record of human adaptability. In the next part, we will begin drawing these threads together more deliberately, examining what the long history of tooth cleaning tells us about progress itself, and why even the smallest daily habits carry the weight of human experience behind them. When viewed from a distance, the history of tooth cleaning can seem like a narrow, almost trivial subject. Yet, when followed carefully across thousands of years, it becomes a lens through which human adaptation itself is revealed. The act of cleaning teeth may be small, but it sits at the intersection of biology, culture, technology, and survival. Few daily habits have persisted so universally or evolved so continuously in response to changing conditions. One of the most revealing lessons from this long history is that progress is rarely clean or linear. Oral hygiene did not move smoothly from ignorance to enlightenment. It lurched forward, stalled, overcorrected, and recalibrated. People discovered solutions, abused them, and then learned restraint. This pattern mirrors progress in nearly every area of human health. Advancement comes not from avoiding mistakes, but from surviving them. Ancient people relied on observation because that was all they had. Medieval societies preserved tradition because stability mattered more than experimentation. Early modern societies embraced forceful intervention because urgency overwhelmed caution. Modern societies emphasize prevention because accumulated experience finally revealed the cost of reaction. Each phase makes sense only in context. Judging one era by the standards of another obscures the logic that guided human behavior at the time. The toothbrush stands as a symbol of this layered evolution. It did not replace ancient methods overnight. It absorbed their lessons. The idea of mechanical cleaning came from chew sticks. The emphasis on frequency came from ritual cleansing. The awareness of enamel protection came from centuries of abrasion-induced damage. Modern brushing is not a rejection of the past. It is its refinement. This refinement underscores an important truth about human learning. Knowledge advances fastest when consequences are felt personally. Tooth pain was immediate, motivating people to act without delay. Unlike diseases that could be ignored or misattributed, dental pain demanded response. This urgency made oral hygiene one of the earliest areas of preventive health behavior in human history. Yet urgency also drove excess. People scrubbed too hard. They used substances too strong. They traded one form of damage for another. Only with time did balance emerge. This teaches a broader lesson about health behavior. Effective care lies between neglect and obsession. Modern society struggles with this balance as much as ancient ones did. The tools are better, but the impulses are the same. The desire for quick fixes, visible results, and minimal effort remains powerful. Whitening trends, aggressive products, and overuse echo ancient mistakes in new forms. History warns that biology sets limits no matter how advanced technology becomes. Another insight revealed by this history is how deeply habits are shaped by environment. Ancient people cleaned their teeth frequently because food required it. Modern people must clean because food harms. This inversion explains why oral hygiene feels like work today. It compensates for conditions our biology did not evolve to handle. Understanding this inversion fosters empathy rather than judgment. Tooth decay in the modern world is not a moral failure. It is a predictable outcome of exposure. Brushing, flossing, rinsing, and fluoride are defenses against an environment that has become chemically hostile to teeth. This historical perspective also challenges complacency. Because tools feel advanced, people assume problems are solved. Yet oral disease remains widespread globally. Access to hygiene tools, education, and dental care remains uneven. The same forces that shaped ancient disparities still operate today. Wealth, diet, education, and environment continue to dictate outcomes. What has changed is awareness. For the first time in history, humanity understands why tooth cleaning matters. The mechanisms are known. The solutions exist. The remaining challenge is consistency and access. This marks a turning point unlike any before it. The toothbrush is no longer an experiment. It is a proven tool. The question is no longer whether teeth can be preserved, but whether society will support habits and environments that allow preservation to occur universally. This brings the story full circle. Ancient people cleaned their teeth because pain taught them to. Modern people clean their teeth because history teaches them to. The motivation has shifted from survival to foresight. That shift represents one of the most profound achievements of human health behavior. As this documentary approaches its final part, The narrative narrows to a simple but powerful realization. Tooth cleaning is not about tools, it is about attention. Attention to the body's signals. Attention to patterns learned over time. Attention to the quiet accumulation of small acts that prevent large consequences. The toothbrush is small, the habit is brief, the impact is enormous. In the final part, we will bring this journey to a close by reflecting on why this ancient habit endures, what it reveals about human resilience, and why understanding its history makes the simple act of brushing feel profoundly human rather than mundane. When all the centuries of experimentation, pain, ingenuity, and habit are finally laid end to end, the history of tooth cleaning stops being a story about hygiene and becomes a story about humanity itself. Long before science explained bacteria, long before dentists existed, long before toothbrushes lined store shelves, people looked at their suffering and refused to accept it as permanent. That refusal is the quiet force running beneath this entire history. The mouth, more than almost any other part of the body, reminds humans of their vulnerability. It must open daily to the world. It must endure constant exposure. It must function reliably for survival, communication, and connection. When it fails, life narrows. Eating becomes painful. Speech becomes strained. Social presence becomes fragile. Across history, this vulnerability pushed people to act again and again, even when they did not fully understand what they were fighting. Tooth cleaning did not begin as a medical practice. It began as a response to discomfort. It persisted because it worked just enough to matter. Over time, that persistence accumulated knowledge. Each generation inherited habits shaped by the suffering of the last. Even mistakes became lessons. Abrasion taught restraint. Acids taught caution. Pain taught consistency. What makes this story remarkable is not how far technology has come, but how little the goal has changed. From the first chew stick to the modern toothbrush, the objective has always been the same: keep the mouth functional, reduce pain, preserve dignity. Tools evolved, but intention remained constant. Modern brushing can feel mundane, almost trivial. It happens quickly, often without thought. Yet behind that brief routine stand thousands of years of trial and error. Every gentle stroke of a toothbrush represents an understanding earned slowly, at great cost. It represents knowledge that enamel cannot be replaced, that bacteria thrive invisibly, that moderation outperforms force, that prevention matters more than repair. This understanding did not arrive all at once. It emerged gradually, shaped by culture, environment, diet, and belief. Oral hygiene adapted because humans adapted. When food changed, habits changed. When pain intensified, methods intensified. When damage became visible, restraint followed. Progress did not eliminate struggle. It refined the response to it. The toothbrush, then, is not a symbol of modern superiority. It is a symbol of continuity. It connects ancient instinct to modern science. It embodies the same impulse that drove people to chew bitter roots, rub ash on enamel, rinse their mouths with wine, or scrape plaque with cloth. The difference lies not in care, but in clarity. For the first time in history, humanity understands why tooth cleaning works. The invisible enemy has been named. The balance between protection and damage is known. The remaining challenge is no longer ignorance, but attention. Habits must be maintained, diets must be considered, access must be expanded, knowledge must be remembered. The past offers a warning as much as a lesson. When people forget why a habit exists, they misuse it. When they chase appearance over function, damage follows. When convenience replaces consistency, decay returns. Ancient mistakes resurface not because knowledge disappears, but because urgency fades. Yet the past also offers reassurance. Humans have always learned from discomfort. They have always adjusted when suffering became too great. Oral hygiene did not survive thousands of years by accident. It survived because it mattered. Every culture found its own way to clean teeth because every culture discovered the same truth independently. The mouth cannot be ignored. Pain demands response. Survival rewards maintenance. In a world filled with complex technologies and invisible systems, brushing teeth remains one of the simplest acts of care. It takes minutes. It requires no explanation. Yet, it represents one of the longest-running health behaviors in human history. Few habits connect us so directly to our ancestors. When you brush your teeth, you are not just practicing modern hygiene. You are participating in an ancient conversation between the body and the world, a conversation shaped by necessity, refined by observation, and preserved by routine. The toothbrush is quiet. The act is ordinary. But the history behind it is anything but. It is a story of persistence in the face of pain, of learning without certainty, of improvement without perfection, and it reminds us of something essential. Progress is not always loud. Sometimes it lives in the smallest daily acts, repeated long enough to matter. That is how people brushed their teeth before toothbrushes, and that is why they never stopped trying.